do your intro, Lawrence?
Oh, I thought you were going to do a 30-second clip or something.
Yeah, I can do that. We'll go ahead and get started with that then. Let me share this.
Then we'll start officially.
Yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about failure and using failure to succeed and as a motivator. And we've used the Michael Jordan quote a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, but I think it's more important and it's more profound to hear it directly from his mouth. So I'm going to just share a quick 30-second clip with you guys, and then we're going to get into the meat of the talk.
Failure.
Hey, Dan, just so you know, the audio is not working from the video clip. You've got to share that.
Oh, it didn't. I'm sorry. All right. Well, we'll just have to move forward. Whoops. I might have to start downloading those clips first. So I apologize for that. But the quote basically is, if you didn't catch any of that, Michael Jordan has failed over and over and over in his career. And failure is why he succeeds. So I think it's really important how we think about failure and how we talk about failure and how we respond to failure. Another quote that Michael Jordan had is, "I can accept failure. Everyone fails at something, but I can't accept not trying." So, in order to fail, you have to try, right? And then on top of that, it's how you respond to failures is going to determine how you succeed or if you succeed.
So apropos, the opening every Friday on the mindset is a little quote from Ogmandino, and it's, "The slaughterhouse of failure is not in my destiny. I will persist until I succeed." This is something that we talk every single Friday, because the slaughterhouse of failure, this is not in my destiny, and it shouldn't be in anybody else's destiny either. So Michael was going to show, Stan was going to show this little clip on Michael Jordan, but the causes, we're actually going to look for the causes of failure and why we fail and why we shouldn't and how we can overcome that.
Yeah, so that, to find the causes of fear or fear of failure, we need to understand what failure actually means. And failure for every person is a little bit different. We all have a different definition because we all have different benchmarks for what failure, what success actually mean. We have different values and belief systems. So failure to one person can mean a great learning experience, and for someone else it can mean something completely different. And I sat around last night when I was thinking about this talk, and I was, trying to think about how many times I failed at something, and I honestly couldn't think of one. Not because I haven't failed, but I just don't look at them as failures. So I honestly, I went back through 30, 40 years of my life, and I couldn't come up with a time where I actually diagnosed something as a failure in my life, because I've always learned something from not succeeding, and I look at it as not succeeding. I don't look at it as a failure. So it's all a personal perception of how you view failure, how you view success, and what that means for you, and how your mindset is going to affect how you come through those situations. So you cultivate success through failure, and failure is a natural path to success.
Well, I think also there's a clear definition about the people, why some people fail and stay there, and some people fail and go forward as an incentive. Each time they fail, it's an incentive to go forward, and other people fail and they just stay there. And I think because sometimes failure can just mean returning to a comfort zone a known situation. In other words, you say, well, if I win, I can get a new car. But if I don't win, well, I'll just keep the car I got. So it's like going back to the comfort zone of a known situation. So that is when people kind of give up, and they're not so strongly motivated to learn from the failure and go forward and use that as a stepping stone, as a motivation. Like Dan has just said, he can't see that that he's failed any time because he's looked at it as a positive thing. So we can do that, but there's a definition between the two. One is, as I say, going back to a comfort zone, but the other one is that the pain of my current situation has to be greater than the pain for me to go forward, for me to stay there. On the other hand, if the pain to go forward is greater than the pain in where I'm at, I'll stay where I am. So it's a question of how painful is it for me to go forward? How much work am I going to have to do? And if that pain is less than the pain of where I'm at, I'm in a pathetic situation. Oh my gosh, I'm just ridiculous. That's painful. That pain has got to be greater than the pain of whatever it takes to go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news about that is that we can actually cultivate a mindset to get out of that situation. So, even though the pain may be greater, being where you're trying to move forward than it is where you're currently at, you need to learn how to step outside your comfort zone, find those little positives that are going to lead you towards success. And so if you look at successful people, we talked a little bit last week about action mindset, and we had some names up there: Nikola Tesla, Elon Musk, and some others. If you look at the people that we deem as being successful, they've all experienced failure. None of them have gotten to where they've become a cultural icons of success without having failure. So Michael Jordan's widely considered to be one of the greatest basketball players of all time, and he was cut from his high school basketball team because his coach didn't think he had enough skill. And what did he do to get out of that situation? That's a pathetic situation, as Lawrence put it. He's in a situation where his high school coach, is telling him that he just doesn't have the skills. So he basically told his coach, "I'm going to work harder than anybody else on this team to prove to you that I have the skills to be on this team and be a great basketball player." Warren Buffett is one of the world's richest and most successful businessmen. He was rejected by Harvard University. And then Richard Branson, he was a high school dropout. All of these guys had successful folks had failures in their life, and it's just how they adapted their mentality to use those failures to succeed. And we're all capable of doing that. That's one of the nice things about failure is that we can define it however we want, and we can define success however we want. And so, it's easy to put together a game plan or alter your mindset to view these things, failures differently and successes differently, and how you're going to be affected by both.
So, I agree. How many times we fail will depend on how badly we want to succeed before some of us give up. And that is the differentiator. Some of us are going to give up. And those are the ones that have to understand that they don't need to give up. They've just got to change tweak their thinking as to a failure is not a failure. Dan just said it so succinctly at the beginning. I didn't see any failures. That is so cool when you look at things and say, well, it wasn't a failure because, okay, I went into chapter 11, but it wasn't a failure because I learned whatever from there. So it's a strength rather than a weakness. And each time we fail, if we look at it as a strength, and then that will drive us to forward.
And if you look at successes and failures, or failures in particular as a negative, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities, right? You have to think of all the opportunities that you're going to miss out on when you let failure stop you, right? So if you have failure after failure and you stop, it's going to really limit the opportunities that you have available to you if you continually let failures be a negative in your life. And so it's important to look at not only what causes failures, how failures affect you, but also how to not be afraid of failure. A lot of people don't do or take action or take massive action because they have a fear of failure. So, there's some things that you can do to not be afraid of failure. And it's important to realize that in everything we do, there's always a chance that we're going to fail, right? And facing that chance and embracing it is what's going to lead us to success, right? It gives us a fuller, more rewarding life by facing fear and looking past potential failures on our way to success. So, there's a few ways to reduce the fear of failing, and one of them is to analyze all the potential outcomes. Basically, what you're doing is you're limiting the chances of failure and how those failures are going to affect you, so you can analyze all the potential outcomes. Most people that experience a fear of failure, it's because they fear the unknown, right? They don't want to step outside their comfort zone. They're comfortable in what they're doing. And, as Lawrence put it, to go back to what he said about the fear of failure, and it being more important, or the fear of failure has to be higher to move forward than to be in the place that you're currently at. So just limiting those potential outcomes as failures.
Well, the other thing, when you talk about fear of failure or fear of going forward, and you say, well, you've got to try and analyze as many parts of the alternatives as possible, or as many aspects of what you're going to do as possible. That can lead to paralysis by analysis. So, there has to be a point where one says, well, I'm going to go for this, and I'm going to analyze this and that, and the next thing. On the other hand, if you analyze that too much, you become paralyzed by analysis. So paralysis by analysis, I'm of the opinion of the other side, and I'm saying, absolutely not. I think the reason I say that is because there are always going to be curveballs. Even though we think we've analyzed every single detail about everything. Let's take COVID. We had everything analyzed, man. We had everything ducks in a row. And then boom, COVID comes. I mean, COVID affected everybody. There's a curveball that nobody expected. And there are curveballs in every business that we have, or in any aspect of our lives that happen, that we often don't expect. It could be somebody getting sick, or it could be an accident, could be a birth, could be whatever. So I believe that we should actually just go for it and figure it out as we're going, because that way we learn as we go. Otherwise, we cannot have all the answers before we go anyway. And Elon Musk, one of the things he said when they asked him, I think I mentioned this before, they said, what does it feel like to be an entrepreneur like you going into uncharted waters? He says, it looks like going into an area of total darkness where there's nothing and there's everything I can do, because I've got to do it, because I can't see anything there. So he, in his own mind, he's the one who put it there. So I think it's important that we have that positive attitude, but no matter how positive the attitude is, it has to be married to discipline, because that's the other point that goes with doing something that we're embarking on. It has to be, you have to be fearless, but also disciplined.
I totally agree. And I agree with your just moving forward and making a decision to do something and going after it. But for myself, from my own perspective, I do like to look at a few of the potential outcomes, just so I know where I'm heading and I'm headed in the right direction. But along with that, comes the growth mindset and thinking positively. One of the biggest mindsets you can have to avoid failure is having that positive mindset where it's a great way to build self-confidence and neutralize self-sabotage. And last week we talked a little bit about an action mindset and surrounding yourself with those that have a similar mindset or similar successes and failures, and have been successful in business, or surrounding yourself and reading good books on topics that are relevant to what we're doing and relevant to business and leadership and those other things. So just surrounding yourself with that positive mindset and positive thinking, thought awareness, rational thinking, and it's just can be a resource for changing your thoughts to be more positive.
Yeah, of course. If you and you're quite right. We've got to, whatever we're doing, we've got to completely introspect and keep tweaking and seeing if we're on the right track, because it's one thing to embark on it, even though we think we've got all the answers. We've got to keep tweaking that at all times, because otherwise we'll go completely off course. So worst case scenario, of course, we've got to take that into account. But also focus on the best case scenario. Because if we focus on what the worst case scenario is, what we focus on grows. And then, we start focusing on that. We say, oh, what if it's not going to go well, and so on. So rather focus on what can and will go well.
Absolutely. And if, anytime you're in sales or you're dealing with groups of people, trying to get them involved in your cause, and our particular cause is the biophotonic scanner, helping people become healthier, you're going to get a lot of no's, right? I've been a career, lifelong sales professional, and I can guarantee you I've had probably 1,000 more no's than I've had yeses. And it's just how you dust yourself off after each of those no's and how you look at those no's. I told folks getting into the business, kids coming out of college, my first thing that I would tell them is you have to have thick skin. You can't take no's personally. It's not a personal attack on your character. It's just a no. And that no can always turn into a yes. It's about timing, and I've had that happen in this business multiple times where, I've talked to somebody and then 6 months, 9 months down the line, they come back and start asking more questions. It just wasn't the right time for them. And so, that's kind of my contingency plan. I have my daily activities where I'm reaching out to folks on a daily basis, introducing them to the business, physicians and medical device sales reps, pharmaceutical reps. And then my contingency plan is all of these folks that I've talked to in the past, right? I can continually reach out to those folks, even as though they said no, but keeping in touch with them and keeping those touch points. Because if you're not keeping in touch with folks that you've talked to in the past that maybe said no, you're not going to come to the forefront of their mind. If you're continually reaching out to them every month or so, with just a quick note, hey, how are you? Just wanted to see how you're doing. Anything changed in your life? Happy Valentine's Day or whatever holiday it may be. Just something very simple, succinct, just to put you back in their forefront of their mind. And they may say, hey, I remember this guy. He talked to me about this biophotonic scanner. I was interested. I thought it was interesting, but at the time, I just didn't have time to focus on it. And so that's how, I continually have people coming back to me because I'm just keeping in touch with them long term, whether it be a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, just keep a list of all those folks that you've talked to and just be continually sending them out messages just to rekindle that relationship.
Absolutely. And the circumstances of life continually change. So when you might talk to someone and that person is actually in a bad mood, or he's just had an argument with his or her partner, the kid may have had a problem at school or whatever, and they're off, they're not polite or something like that, don't write them off, because you never know. What's it like that ad on TV? What's in your wallet? You don't know what's in the person's mind. You don't know what's happening. Why is he so rough? Why is he gruff? Why is he so? And then person changes because the job changed, or because he got divorced, or she got divorced, or whatever. So the circumstances change. And by the circumstances changing, our own receptivity to being more open changes as well, because we've just had some kind of affliction, some kind of change, some kind of upheaval, some kind of anything going on. And then we say, oh my gosh, now you look around and, oh, now you remember that Dan called and he wished you a happy birthday, or he mentioned about Valentine or something like that. So on that part of it, I'd like to also think about something in our business. When Dan was talking about, quite rightly, analyzing all the variables in a business and where we're going and how we're going and so on, while I obviously agree with that, we have all that done for us. There is no variable we need to understand from the company point of view, from the science, from the technology, from the products. We don't have to wonder if this is going to work, if the products are going to work, if they're going to pay us, if the shipments are going to go. All of those variables are taken care of. So the big difference then comes when we go into this business is, am I going to do this by burning my bridge? Which means that if I'm totally committed, I'm committed if I know all the variables. That's when you can burn a bridge, when you can say, okay, I know the variables, or I 100% believe in what I'm doing. You burn the bridge, then you've got no option but to go forward. It's not like, in case I don't succeed, then I'll go back to what I was doing. That's kind of, it's okay, but it's not as strong as actually just getting all the cobwebs out of the mind, understand the variables are all taken care of, we know what they all are, and is a proven system, and we can burn the bridge and go forwards with absolute conviction.
Absolutely. One of the things I just want to expand upon from my last comments is that I think there's, as Lawrence said, nobody could have expected COVID to come along and throw us that curveball, right? And that curveball is still not over. In the early days of COVID, we saw, massive layoffs, furloughs, things like that in the medical device world, pharmaceutical world. But I think we're getting into a space now where they're starting to bring folks back. Things are starting to normalize somewhat. But what I've found from conversations with reps is that what's happening now is that their commissions are starting to get cut, right? And so all of these folks that we talked to 6 months, a year and a half ago that may not have been interested at the time, now they've had their livelihood kind of thrown into upheaval. They all have mortgages to pay, car payments to pay, children to provide for. And in some cases, their commissions have gotten cut in half, from 10% to 5%. That's a big cut when you're a medical device sales rep. So those folks are going to be worth reaching out to and talking to, because, what I found is that a lot of these folks that weren't interested 6 months, a year ago, are all of a sudden, yeah, I'm interested. I'm looking for ways to increase my revenue. So they're willing to take the time to listen now. I think they were all under the false pretense that this thing was going to last 3 months and they were all going to be brought back to work by June or July of last year, which never happened. And now I think it's starting to sink in that times have changed and they may not go back to where they were pre-COVID. So I'd encourage everybody to reach out to, start looking back through your list from the last year and reaching out to some of those folks. Use failure as a natural path to success. These aren't failures. This is a perfect opportunity where you could look at, having these conversations a year ago and then saying no as a failure, but it's actually can turn into a success if we rekindle that relationship and they actually have a need for it and the timing's right.
Dan said at the beginning of COVID, he said, don't waste this crisis. Well, that was from our own personal point of view, a reference to our own personal point of view. But if we think about it, COVID has been like an earthquake and it's made a seismic shift in most businesses. For example, people are now working from home. Many people have lost their jobs. many people are getting their commissions cut. Companies, like major companies, have gone out of business in the malls and this kind of place, these type of places. So it's an absolutely fertile opportunity to go back to to the people we were talking to, quite right, Michael, and look back and say, well, how are you doing now? What's changed in your life? And many of them will say, well, as you just said, commissions changed, work times have changed. We no longer have an office, we're now all working from home. I spoke to someone yesterday. They had 200 employees working in an office in downtown Miami, 200 of them. And I said, well, what time can I come and see you? And she said, we're all working from home. That's 200 people working from home, and their office is now leased. So, and they're going to start turning those into apartments, just saying. So it's a seismic shift in all of what we were doing in that comfort zone of known factors to today, an exciting part of a new chapter where we can explore new possibilities, and people can actually have a more open mind into what we can achieve and what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things have changed, and I think there's going to be a lot more people out there looking for opportunities, and this is going to expand the gig economy that was happening prior to COVID. I think that's just going to be accelerated to more and more people looking for side gigs and side hustles. So I think we're at almost 10 o'clock.
9:58. So if anybody wants to have any comments or make any comments or anything, please feel free, unmute yourselves. I will just finish by saying the will to succeed is a choice. How we go about it can be as easy as following a proven system, which is what we have. Good morning, Team Elites. If anybody has any question or any comment or anything like that, please go ahead.
Dan, I have a question for you. It's Martin. Wanted to just ask you, as you've talked with the medical device reps, are you seeing them being pushed into a 1099 relationship rather than a W-2 relationship?
Yeah, more and more I'm seeing they're being pushed into 1099 relationships, especially some of the larger orthopedic companies are going that way. The pharmaceutical companies, I think a lot of them generally are W-2 and stay W-2, but within the medical device companies, they've been oscillating back and forth over the last 15 years to 1099 W-2. Right. Every 3 years, they can go from being a private distributorship where you're W-2 with a distributor, and then all of a sudden they take you back to corporate, they fire the distributor, take you back to corporate, and you're 1099. But I think since COVID, the last 6 months, I think it seems to be going more towards 1099 relationships, where then those folks are able to carry different lines and do other things because they're 1099 employees. They're not, it's not as stringent as to what they can do when they're W-2 employees. So yes, I think it's going more towards 1099.
Which is very interesting, because that also means that I find the difference in mindset between a W-2 person and a 1099 person, it's night and day. And if your mind has been coerced into being open to the 1099 relationship, that gives us a much greater opportunity to have those dialogues.
Yeah, there's definitely a completely different mind shift. So I've worked as a 1099 almost my entire career, and it's you eat what you kill. If you're not out there selling, if you're not out there being aggressive and peddling your wares, you're not going to make any money. So I tend to generally look for people that have that 1099 mentality, and because even though to your point, even if they're W-2 folks that are being pushed towards 1099, that doesn't necessarily mean anything's going to change in their life from a mindset standpoint, right? Because as W-2 employees, they were used to just babysitting the business. A lot of them were getting paid for basically just making sure that business stayed even keel. They didn't lose any business. They didn't gain any business. And I think that's the mentality they're going to have when they go 1099. And going 1099, sometimes they can actually make more money because they may actually increase their commission rate a little bit because they're not providing 401k and benefits and all that other stuff. So those folks that are W-2 that are used to just kind of babysitting business, they're going to look at that as an opportunity. They're making more money just by going 1099 without having to put in any extra effort. So it's a kind of a catch-22, but you really need to weed out those folks that have that 1099 mentality versus the W-2.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Dan,
Yeah, Jim.
you're looking great today.
Thank you, sir.
You must be on the road to recovery, buddy.
I bounced back pretty quick.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess you let a little failure or bump in the road not slow you down and find your next way to that next success, right?
No, I've been curled up in the fetal position in my bedroom, just ignoring everything.
Right.
No, it's
hey, there's a lesson in that. It's how quickly do you get back up, right? Some people may let a negative feeling carry with them for 3 or 4 days. They lose their momentum. If you let it last for 15 seconds, and then you just move, the faster you keep staying with the program, I think the better chance you'll keep your momentum going.
No, absolutely. I mean, I had the setback in late November, and that was kind of the first serious health problem that I ever had. And I let it affect me probably a little bit more just because I wasn't used to dealing with health problems. But I think I mentioned this I either mentioned this on our team call. I basically said to myself, look, as soon as I'm able, within a day or two, I'm going to continue the momentum that I had, because in December, I lost a lot of momentum because I just spent way too much downtime trying to recover, which probably mentally and physically wasn't the best thing for me. So I wanted to do just the opposite of that this time.
Yeah, good move. A business analogy to that is, my understanding is that the people in the pharmaceutical, particularly device rep, arena, can expect to keep their job on average about 3 years. But there are some out there that have been with the same company for 10 years or longer. And they're the ones that are like you. I was never unhealthy. So when it did happen, I had no idea what to do. It took me a long time to respond, right? And that's what a lot of these people are doing now that may have lost their jobs during COVID. They're like a deer in the headlights. They're fearful. They don't know what to do. That's a great opportunity for us to bring some light and positive business platform into their life.
Yeah, the problem, I can imagine a lot of them are probably looking at themselves as failures, or that as being a failure, even though it had really nothing to do with their performance. Yeah. It's just an extraneous variable that affected everybody. And so, how you let that particular situation affect you is probably going to affect you for years.
Yeah.
Just that mentality. And if you go on unemployment and things like that, and you let that drag out, I think if you're on unemployment, it makes it a lot easier for you to have that failure mentality and let it affect you negatively, because you could just ride out some unemployment and you still have some money coming in. And but that's my own personal opinion. I've never really done that, so I don't know how it would affect me. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. We can bring a lot of light to folks who are like deers in a headlight. A lot of them are probably younger kids this is their first job and they've done it for 3 years, and now they're jobless. What am I going to do next? What's next in store for me? I've still got student loans to pay.
Right.
It's a difficult situation for a lot of people, and I think we can bring some positivity to a lot of people.
It's also a good time to bring the reality of that industry to the forefront for them, because they may be looking at 30 more years of career. They need to recognize, if you take that path only, every 3 years on average, this is what you can expect. And it gets harder and harder as you get further down that path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, for somebody that's lost that W-2 position, that goes against the grain of what they were trained. We're all indoctrinated in our society to go to school, get a job. And when they start working with a 1099, there's an opportunity for investment in their self through education about the cash flow quadrant and how they can really excel that they have not been introduced to before. So we don't want to lose that opportunity to introduce that to some of these reps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that I noticed in the last couple of weeks is that there are a plethora of medical device sales college graduates out there looking for work. And what's interesting was this whole medical device sales college thing started about 15 years ago. They had one site, then they realized they could make money training people on how to be medical device sales reps or pharmaceutical reps, and they started opening sites all over the country. And I think it's been overdone. I think it's like college, people with bachelor's degrees. There's too many people out there with bachelor's degrees looking for work, and now you basically have to have your master's or your PhD to find work. So I think that's what's happening with this medical device sales college. Everybody came out of college and they're like, well, what am I going to do? I want to get into medical device sales. It's really hard to get your foot in the door. And then they become convinced that if they go to these medical device sales colleges, that's going to give them a one-up on everybody else who's not going that route. And I took the time to kind of do some research and see what tuition is on that. And it's anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 for like 8 to 12 weeks. So those folks are willing to invest in their future as they see it to become medical device sales reps. They can do the same thing with us and invest in the scanner to go out and start selling that, introducing that to folks for a lot less than $3,000 to $6,000, and all the time it takes them to do that, 8 to 12 weeks, and it can even be longer.
Yeah, and also they won't then be territorially restricted nor practice type restricted. That's a big difference.
And just going to medical device sales college doesn't guarantee you a job with the company. They're just
no.
It's more indoctrination. And they're going to school to get a job, right, and build someone else's business.
Well, it's I think how these medical device sales colleges started, where there were some medical device reps that weren't happy with medical device sales anymore, and they realized that they could benefit from that by helping to train the next group of medical device sales reps. And there's a couple of really entrepreneurial groups of medical device sales reps. When I was getting out, there was this is about 5 or 6 years ago. Prior to 5 or 6 years ago, I could walk into any hospital, I could sell anything, I didn't have to have any credentials. But some medical device sales reps started these credentialing services where you had to pay $350 a year, and you had to give them your TB test and some other credentials for them to approve you to be able to come into the hospital to do business. And they would split that $350 with the hospital. So those guys were making a ton of money. The new thing is, when we would go into hospitals, medical device sales reps, they would provide us with scrubs to be able to go into the operating room. Some medical device reps decided, hey, why don't we start a company that has disposable scrubs, and the reps have to pay $10 for the scrubs every day they come in. And sometimes you might need to change 2, 3, 4 times. That's $30, $40 potentially in profit. So it's, there's people out there in the medical device world trying to figure out ways to get out of medical device, but still use their relationships and things to still make a buck. But with the medical device sales college, I probably connected with, 1,000 medical device sales rep college graduates in the last week or so. And it's just interesting how many there are out there. There's way more of them available than I think there are jobs.
Well, awesome call today, guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Well,
Yes, thank you. Terrific.
Lawrence, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up then. Appreciate everybody getting on the call today. And don't forget about our Wednesday calls with Scott Bennett and Manzi Shah and Kent on Wednesdays. And then April 24th, we have the healthcare symposium in Boca Raton. Please invite as many folks as possible to that.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Right,
weekend.
thanks everybody for being on.
Thanks,
Bless
everyone.
you all.